"I want an heir from you," said the Apache woman to the shy farmer. "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much." In the heart of the rugged American West, on the edge of the frontier, there lived a quiet farmer named Samuel. For years, he had carved out a life for himself in the vast, untamed land. His farm was small but sufficient, tucked away in a valley surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Samuel was a man of few words, a product of a life spent alone. He was not the type of man to seek the company of others, preferring the solitude that the land provided. Despite his quiet existence, Samuel's heart longed for something more, though he could never quite put his finger on it. He had never been one to take risks, never one to challenge the boundaries of his own world. But that all changed one fateful afternoon. It was a hot summer day when the dust of the dirt road was thick in the air and the sun beat down mercilessly. Samuel was finishing up his work in the fields when he heard the sound of hooves approaching. At first, he thought it was just another traveler passing by, but as the sound grew louder, he could tell it was something different. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure riding towards him, a woman, tall and confident. She was dressed in traditional Apache attire, her posture commanding and unwavering. As she drew closer, Samuel's heart began to race. He had heard tales of Apache warriors, of the fierce and proud people who roamed the land, but he had never expected to encounter one in person. The woman dismounted from her horse with a grace that caught him off guard, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel exposed. She was beautiful in a way that was both powerful and unsettling. Her presence seemed to demand attention, and for a moment, Samuel felt as though the earth beneath him had shifted. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I am from the Apache tribe, and I come seeking a favor." Samuel stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. He had never interacted with anyone from her people, and he had heard stories of conflict, of distrust. But there was something in her eyes, something that made him hesitate, just for a moment. "What kind of favor?" he asked, his voice betraying his uncertainty. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "I need an heir," she said simply, her words carrying a weight that Samuel could not comprehend. "I have been chosen to bear a child who will carry on the strength of my people. And I believe you are the one to father this child." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. The words felt like a blow to his chest, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. "Why me?" he managed to ask, still struggling to process the enormity of what she was asking. She didn't flinch, didn't show any sign of hesitation. "Because you are strong in ways that I have seen only in those who are destined for something greater. You have the heart of a leader, though you may not realize it." Samuel took a step back, his mind racing. This was a moment unlike any he had ever faced. He had never considered himself anything special, just a simple farmer, living a quiet life. Yet here was this woman, standing before him, asking him to change the course of his existence forever. He wanted to refuse, to tell her that he was not the man she thought he was. But something about her presence, something about the way she spoke, made him pause. There was no fear in her eyes, only purpose. "I cannot promise you anything," he said slowly, still trying to make sense of the situation. "I am not the man you think I am." She smiled, the curve of her lips a mixture of understanding and something else, something deeper. "I know who you are, Samuel. That is why I came to you. We all have a destiny, whether we choose to face it or not." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Samuel stood in silence, torn between the life he had known and the unknown, future that was suddenly laid out before him. As the days passed, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling of the Apache woman's presence lingering in the air. Each time he walked outside, he expected to see her standing at the edge of his land, watching him, waiting for an answer. But there was nothing. Just the wind rustling through the tall grass and the distant mountains that framed the valley. His farm felt emptier than ever. The silence of the land had always been comforting, but now it felt oppressive. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had asked. He had always been a man of few words, a man who avoided conflict, who stayed in his lane and let life pass him by. But now, for the first time in years, his quiet existence had been shattered. Every morning, he woke up with the question still burning in his mind. What should he do? As the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, Samuel found himself standing by his barn, staring out into the distance. The air was cool, the scent of hay and earth mingling with the faint smell of smoke from the campfire he had started. He hadn't seen her since that day she came to him, and yet, it felt as though she were still here, in the very soil beneath his feet. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hooves approaching. He turned around, half expecting to see her again, but instead, it was another figure on horseback. A man, dressed in worn clothes, his face weathered and rough. The man's eyes met Samuel's, and for a moment, they simply stood there, sizing each other up. The stranger was tall, broad-shouldered, and had an air about him that suggested he was no stranger to hard work or hardship. "I'm looking for the man who lives here," the stranger said, his voice low and gruff. Samuel nodded slowly, unsure of what to expect. "That would be me," he replied, his voice tight. The man dismounted and walked up to him, his eyes never leaving Samuel's. "You've been visited by a woman, Apache, I presume?" Samuel stiffened. He had a feeling he knew where this conversation was headed. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "She was here." The stranger nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "She is a powerful woman," the man said, his tone almost reverent. "You're in her sights now. You've been chosen. I suggest you think carefully about what comes next." Samuel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had known that her request wasn't a simple one, but hearing it spoken aloud, from the mouth of a stranger, made it all the more real. "I didn't ask for any of this," Samuel said, his voice thick with frustration. "I don't even know why she came to me." The man looked at him, his gaze intense. "It doesn't matter why she came. What matters is that she sees something in you. Something that you've probably been blind to your whole life." Samuel shook his head, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. "I'm just a farmer. I don't belong in her world. I don't belong with her." The stranger studied him for a moment, then spoke again, this time with more urgency in his voice. "You don't get to choose that, not anymore. She's already made her decision, and it's up to you whether or not you accept it." Samuel was silent, the words echoing in his mind. The man turned to leave, but paused. "You'll be seeing her again, and when you do, you'll need to decide what kind of man you want to be. The choice is yours, but remember, in the end, it's not about what you want. It's about what you're willing to give up." With that, the stranger mounted his horse and rode off into the dusk, leaving Samuel standing alone once again. The night air felt colder now, the weight of the man's words settling heavily on his shoulders. He turned back toward his house, the flickering light of his lantern casting long shadows on the ground. He had never imagined that a simple request could change the course of his life. But now, he realized that the moment of decision had arrived. It was no longer a matter of whether he could turn away from her. The real question was whether he was willing to embrace the unknown, to face a future that might be filled with challenges he couldn't even begin to understand. Samuel stepped into his cabin, the door creaking shut behind him. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth it provided felt distant, as if even the flames knew that something had shifted, something fundamental that couldn't be undone. He sat down at the table, his hands resting on the rough wood, and closed his eyes. The silence of the night enveloped him, but it no longer felt like peace. It felt like the calm before a storm. Samuel spent the next few days in a haze, his mind constantly drifting back to the conversation with the stranger. The weight of the decision hung over him like a storm cloud, threatening to break at any moment. Every time he walked out into the fields, the horizon seemed more distant, as if the land itself was closing in on him. He could feel the pull of something greater, something that would require him to step outside of his comfort zone, to face a future he had never planned for. The days were long and hot, the sun beating down on his back as he worked tirelessly, trying to outrun the thoughts that kept circling in his mind. But every time he stopped, even for a moment, the question returned. Could he accept the path she had laid out for him? Could he accept her request? As he worked, Samuel's gaze often wandered to the spot where she had stood that day, the Apache woman, her presence still lingering in the air. He knew that soon he would have to make a decision, but he didn't feel ready. He was just a simple farmer, a man who had always kept to himself. He had never been a man of power, never thought of himself as someone who could change the world. And yet, here he was, being asked to do just that. The morning came when he could put it off no longer. The wind was calm, the sky clear, and as he made his way to the barn, he saw her. She was waiting for him, standing by the fence, her horse tethered nearby. She looked as strong and confident as ever, but there was something softer in her expression now, a hint of vulnerability that made Samuel's heart race. He took a deep breath and approached her. "I've thought about what you said," Samuel began, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "And I'm still not sure what to make of it." She nodded, as if she had expected this. "It's a lot to take in," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you and me. It's about something much bigger." Samuel looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "I've been chosen to bear a child who will carry the strength of my people, a child who will help lead us through the challenges that lie ahead. But I cannot do this alone. I need someone who understands what it means to fight for something greater than oneself." Samuel felt the weight of her words sink in. This was more than just a simple request. It was a call to action, a call to become something more than he had ever imagined. But could he do it? Could he accept the responsibility of becoming a father to a child that was not his own, a child who would carry the hopes and dreams of an entire people? "I don't know if I'm the right man for this," Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life working the land, living alone. I'm not a leader. I'm not even sure I can be the man you need." She smiled, a knowing smile, one that seemed to see right through him. "You are more than you think," she said softly. "You have the strength inside you, Samuel. It's been there all along. You just need to believe in it." Her words resonated deep within him, stirring something he had long buried. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was stronger than he gave himself credit for. "And if I say yes?" Samuel asked, his voice thick with uncertainty. "What happens next?" She placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "You come with me," she said. "You become a part of something much larger than yourself. And together, we build a future." Samuel stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of her words, feeling the pull of destiny. This was no longer just about him. It was about the future of the Apache people, about something far greater than his quiet, solitary life. He took a deep breath, his mind racing, and then he made his decision. "I will go with you," he said, his voice steady. "I will help you." She smiled, her eyes bright with something he couldn't quite place, gratitude, hope, or maybe something even deeper. "Thank you," she said, softly. "This is just the beginning, Samuel. Together, we will change everything." As she mounted her horse and rode off, Samuel stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the distance. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the edge of something big, something that could change everything. And for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty for Samuel. He had left the farm, left behind the life he had known, and now rode alongside the Apache woman through the rugged terrain, her presence still as commanding as it had been that first day. Every step felt like a leap into the unknown, and as they journeyed deeper into the wilderness, Samuel couldn't help but question whether he had made the right decision. They traveled for miles, the landscape changing from the flat plains he was familiar with to the rocky hills and dense forests that stretched out before them. As they rode, the Apache woman, whose name was Ayanna, told him stories of her people, of their customs, their struggles, and their victories. Samuel listened, fascinated, though he could not fully grasp the weight of what she was asking him to be a part of. It wasn't just the child, the heir she sought to bear, it was the future of her entire tribe. She had explained that the child she would carry was not just a symbol of her own bloodline, but of the strength of the Apache people. This child would unite their people, lead them through the challenges of a changing world, and help preserve their way of life. But the more Samuel listened, the more he realized how much was at stake. This was no ordinary request. Ayanna's mission was a sacred one, and now he was part of it. As they reached the edge of a dense forest, Ayanna guided her horse to a small clearing, the ground soft beneath their feet. Samuel dismounted, his legs stiff from the long ride, and looked around. There were no signs of civilization here, only the untamed beauty of nature. It was peaceful, but also unsettling. This place, he realized, was where he would face his own transformation. "This is where we will stay," Iana said, her voice calm but firm. "We are close to the sacred land of my people." Samuel nodded, but his heart raced. He had not expected things to move so quickly. They had only just begun this journey, yet here they were, at the heart of it all. He had no idea what to expect next, but he could sense that whatever came would change everything. Iana dismounted, tying her horse to a nearby tree. "We must prepare," she said, looking at him with a steady gaze. "There are things you need to understand before we move forward." Samuel looked at her, his mind still processing everything that had happened in the past few days. "What do I need to understand?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Iana smiled, a small, knowing smile. "You must learn to embrace who you are, Samuel. The man you have been is not the man you will be." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always thought of himself as a simple farmer, a man of the land, with no grand ambitions or dreams. But now, Iana was asking him to become something more, something that felt beyond his reach. "How do I do that?" he asked quietly. "How do I become the man you need?" Iana's expression softened. "You have already started," she said, her voice gentle. "By being here, by choosing to follow this path, you have taken the first step. Now, you must trust in yourself and in the journey ahead." Samuel was silent, the weight of her words settling over him. He had always been a man of action, someone who worked hard and kept his head down, but now he realized that the path before him would require something different. It would require faith, courage, and the willingness to step into a future he couldn't fully see. As the evening approached, Iana built a fire, the flames casting flickering shadows across their faces. Samuel sat down beside her, his mind racing with the uncertainty of it all. This was no longer just about him. It was about something much larger. It was about the survival and future of an entire people. Iana's voice broke the silence. "There are many challenges ahead, Samuel," she said, her gaze fixed on the fire. "But if you are willing to embrace this path, we will face them together." Samuel looked at her, his heart heavy with the enormity of what lay ahead. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, "but I'll do what I can." Iana nodded, as if she had a child who will carry the strength of my people, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I wonder if I am asking too much of you. This child will not only be a part of us, but a symbol for our people. It is a heavy burden." Samuel took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had known that Iana's request was not a simple one, but hearing her voice, the weight of it made everything seem much more real. "I don't know if I can live up to that," he said, his voice thick with doubt. "I'm just a farmer, Iana. I don't have the strength that you and your people do." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You do," she said softly. "You have more strength than you know. You were chosen for a reason. This journey, this path, it is not just mine. It is ours." The words hung in the air between them, and Samuel felt something shift deep within him. She was right, of course. He had never considered himself strong, never thought of himself as anything other than a man who worked the land and lived a quiet life. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to him than he had ever realized. The fire crackled, the only sound breaking the silence that had settled between them. After a moment, Samuel spoke, his voice steady. "I will walk this path with you, Iana. I don't know where it leads, but I will stand by you." Iana smiled, a small but genuine smile, and for the first time in days, Samuel felt a glimmer of hope. He did not know what the future held. No one could. But in that moment, with Iana by his side, he felt ready to face it. The following weeks were filled with a sense of urgency. As Samuel and Iana made preparations for the coming changes, they knew that the day would soon arrive when their lives would be forever altered. Iana's people, her tribe, began to arrive in the area, gathering around their small camp. The presence of so many warriors, so many fierce and proud Apache, filled Samuel with awe and trepidation. He had always kept to himself, had always been a stranger to the world of others. But now, he was not just a bystander. He was part of something larger, something that demanded his commitment. One morning, as he stood at the edge of the camp, watching the sun rise over the mountains, Samuel felt the full weight of what he had agreed to. He was no longer just a man who tended to the land. He was a part of something much greater, a story that stretched back through generations, a story that was now being written in a way he could not have imagined. Ayanna approached him, her steps silent on the earth. She stood beside him, her presence calm but strong. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice carrying a quiet strength. Samuel looked at her, his heart beating steadily in his chest. "I think so," he said, his voice firm. "I don't know what comes next, but I am ready to face it with you." Ayanna smiled, the warmth in her eyes telling him all he needed to know. Together, they turned toward the camp, the future waiting just ahead, ready to unfold in ways they could not yet understand. As the weeks turned into months, the camp began to take shape. The Apache people, led by Ayanna, worked together to create a place that would serve as both a sanctuary and a home for their tribe. Samuel watched as the once unfamiliar land slowly transformed into a thriving community, with small shelters rising from the earth, and the sounds of people working together filling the air. Every day, he felt himself becoming more intertwined with this new world, a world he had never known but was now becoming a part of. Ayanna continued to teach him the ways of her people, guiding him with patience and wisdom. He learned the language of the Apache, the songs they sang around the fire, the customs that bound them together as a tribe. But more than that, Ayanna taught him the importance of family, of community, and of the land itself. Samuel had always been a solitary man, keeping to himself and avoiding the company of others. But as he spent more time with Ayanna and the tribe, he began to see the world through a different lens. He saw the strength in unity, the power in shared purpose. For the first time in his life, he felt as though he belonged to something greater than himself. But as the days passed, a sense of unease began to settle within him. The weight of Ayanna's request, the promise she had made, still loomed over him. He had agreed to help her, to become a part of her future, but there was a part of him that still questioned whether he was truly capable of fulfilling that promise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ayanna sat beside him by the fire. Her gaze was distant, her expression unreadable. Samuel could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging between them. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice gentle. "Is something wrong?" Ayanna met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and sorrow. "I fear I have asked too much of you," she said, her voice low. "This child, this future that we are creating, it is not just a gift. It is a responsibility, one that will require all of us to be strong. And I wonder if you are truly ready to face what lies ahead." Samuel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had always known that this journey would not be easy, but hearing Ayanna's words brought the weight of it all into sharp focus. "I don't know if I am ready," he admitted, his voice thick with uncertainty. "I've never been a leader, Ayanna. I've always just worked the land and kept to myself." Ayanna's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "You are more than you think, Samuel," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "You have the strength inside you, even if you don't see it. You have already come so far, and I believe you are capable of much more." Samuel looked at her, the firelight dancing in her eyes, and for a moment, he saw the truth in her words. He had come this far, had embraced a future he had never imagined, and though he was uncertain, he knew that he could not turn back now. "I will stand with you," he said, his voice steady. "I may not have all the answers, but I will face this future with you. Together." Ayanna smiled, the warmth in her expression reassuring him in a way that words alone could not. "Together," she repeated softly. The following days were filled with preparations for the future that awaited them. The tribe gathered in unity, each person playing their part in building a new life, a new beginning. The bond between Samuel and Ayanna deepened as they worked side by side, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. But as the tribe flourished, so too did the challenges they faced. Outside forces, both known and unknown, began to make their presence felt. There were whispers in the wind, rumors of settlers encroaching on their land, of dangers that loomed just beyond the horizon. Samuel could feel the tension in the air, the unease that spread through the camp like wildfire. The future they had worked so hard to build was under threat, and the time had come for them to make a choice: stand together or face the consequences of their divided futures. One night, as Samuel sat outside his shelter, staring into the vast expanse of the stars above, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Ayanna, her presence as steady and strong as ever. "The time has come," she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. "We will fight for what we have built. We will fight for our future, for our people." Samuel looked at her, his heart filled with both fear and hope. He had never been a man of violence, but he knew now that the time for passive waiting had passed. They would not let their future be taken from them. "I am with you," he said, his voice firm. "Together, we will protect what we've built." Ayanna nodded, her eyes reflecting the determination that had always been a part of her. "Together," she said, and with that, they both stood, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, the camp was alive with a sense of urgency. Samuel could feel the change in the air. The tribe had always been strong, proud, and independent, but now, as the whispers of settlers and encroaching threats grew louder, the reality of their situation hit harder than ever. There was no longer any doubt. What they had built was under siege, and it was time to defend it. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the warriors began to prepare. The women and children helped where they could, gathering supplies and fortifying their shelter. Samuel stood by the fire, watching as Ayanna and the others moved with practiced precision. He had never seen them this focused before. Ayanna approached him, her face set in a hard line. Her eyes filled with determination. "It's time," she said quietly, her voice filled with the weight of the responsibility she had carried all these years. "We can't wait any longer. They are coming." Samuel nodded, the resolve in his chest solidifying. He had never been a fighter, never known what it meant to stand in the face of an enemy and defend his land, his people. But now, standing beside Ayanna, he realized that this fight was not just about protecting a piece of land. It was about protecting a way of life, a future that had only just begun. "I'm with you," Samuel said, his voice steady and firm. Ayanna didn't speak for a moment, but her gaze softened. She knew that what they were about to face would change everything. For better or worse, there was no turning back now. Together, they walked to the front of the camp, where the warriors had gathered. The chief stood among them, his face grave, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. "They will come from the west," he said, his voice carrying through the still air. "We must be ready." Samuel's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't a battle he had ever prepared for. But as he looked around at the faces of the warriors, the women, and the children, he felt a sense of purpose begin to fill him. They were not alone in this. He wasn't alone. The next few hours were a blur of movement, of preparing for a fight that no one truly wanted, but everyone knew was inevitable. Samuel found himself working alongside Ayanna, helping to build makeshift barricades and organizing the camp. The days of farming and tending to the land seemed a lifetime ago. Now, every decision felt weighty, every move deliberate. As evening fell and the camp grew quieter, Samuel stood outside his shelter, his eyes trained on the horizon. The night was still, but the silence only seemed to heighten the tension. In the distance, he saw movement, small figures riding towards them. The settlers, it seemed, had come. Ayanna joined him, her presence a calming force beside him. She didn't speak, but the bond between them was evident. She, too, was watching the horizon, waiting for what would come. "We'll hold our ground," she said softly, her eyes never leaving the approaching riders. "We've worked too hard to lose it now." Samuel nodded, his thoughts a whirlwind. The Apache people had faced so much in the past. Warriors had fought for their land, for their people, for their future. But this was different. This was his fight now, too. He had chosen to stand beside Ayanna, to embrace this future with her, and that meant defending everything they had built. The riders grew closer, their horses kicking up dust as they approached. Samuel felt a pang of fear in his chest, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for fear. This was the time to act, to protect what they had. As the riders drew near, Samuel saw the glint of weapons and the stern faces of the men leading the group. The tension was palpable as they stopped at the edge of the camp, their eyes scanning the area. The leader of the riders dismounted, his movements deliberate, as he approached Ayanna and Samuel. "You have been warned," the man said, his voice hard. "This land belongs to us now. You and your people will have to leave." Samuel's heart raced as he looked at Ayanna. She stood tall, unyielding, her face set with determination. Without a word, she stepped forward, standing between the riders and the camp. "We will not leave," she said, her voice calm but filled with authority. "This land is ours, and we will fight to protect it." The man sneered, his eyes cold. "You think you can fight us? You're outnumbered. This is not your land anymore." Ayanna didn't flinch, her gaze never wavering from his. "This land was never yours to take," she said firmly. "We will stand and fight for it, just as our ancestors did before us." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The riders exchanged uneasy glances, and for a moment, Samuel thought they might back down. But the leader's eyes hardened, and he drew his weapon. "Then prepare to fight," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. And just like that, the silence that had settled over the camp was broken. The fight had begun. Samuel stood firm, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never imagined that his life would lead him here, but now, as the first wave of riders advanced, he knew he had made the right choice. He was no longer just a farmer. He was a protector, standing side by side with Ayanna and the Apache people. Together, they would fight, and together, they would defend their future. The clash was inevitable. As the first riders charged forward, the dust kicked up into the hot air, swirling around the camp like an ominous cloud. Samuel's heart pounded in his chest, his instincts screaming at him to move, to protect the people he had come to care for. The Apache warriors, led by Ayanna, stood firm, their weapons at the ready, their expressions unwavering. Samuel, despite his initial doubts, found himself standing with them, ready to defend their future. The leader of the riders, the one who had spoken so arrogantly before, charged forward with a group of men at his side, their eyes cold and determined. They believed they could take the land, that their numbers and strength would make them victorious. But Ayanna and her people were not so easily intimidated. With a fierce war cry, the Apache warriors advanced, meeting the riders in a flurry of movement. Samuel could hardly keep up with the chaos unfolding around him, the sound of clashing metal and the sharp cries of battle filling the air. He had never fought before, but the energy of the fight seemed to flow through him, pushing him forward. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a spear, and held it with a grip he didn't know he had. His body moved on instinct as he fought alongside Ayanna and the others, his heart racing with adrenaline. The riders were powerful, but they were not used to the determination that drove the Apache people. The warriors fought with a precision and unity that Samuel had never seen before. Every strike, every movement was calculated, and they moved as one, a single force. Samuel quickly realized that he was not fighting alone. He was part of something much larger, something that was more than just the battle at hand. It was a fight for survival, for the future of a people. As the battle raged on, Samuel found himself face to face with the leader of the riders, the man who had threatened them earlier. His cold eyes locked onto Samuel's, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The man raised his weapon, ready to strike, but Samuel's hand moved faster, his spear finding its mark with a precision that surprised him. The rider fell, and for a brief moment, the tide of the battle shifted. But there was no time to celebrate. The fight continued, and the Apache warriors pressed on, their strength and unity unmatched. Samuel fought with everything he had, his every move fueled by the knowledge that this was not just about him. It was about everyone he had come to love and protect. As the sun began to set, the battle started to wind down. The riders, though fierce, were outmatched. One by one, they began to retreat, their numbers dwindling in the face of the Apache warriors' relentless charge. Samuel stood among them, exhausted and covered in dust and sweat, but with a sense of triumph that he had never known. They had won. The land, their land, was theirs. But as the last of the riders fled into the distance, Samuel knew that this victory was only the beginning. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The settlers would not give up so easily, and Samuel could feel that more challenges were on the horizon. But for now, they had won. And for the first time, Samuel understood what Ayanna had meant when she said they were fighting for their future. This was their moment, their victory, and it was something that would carry them forward in the days to come. As the camp began to settle down, the warriors gathered around the fire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. Ayanna stood at the front, her presence commanding yet filled with pride. She looked at Samuel, her eyes softening. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "Together, we fought, and together, we have protected our future." Samuel nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride and gratitude. I didn't know I had it in me, he said quietly. But now I see it. I see what it means to fight for something bigger than myself. Ayana smiled, her hand resting on his shoulder. You are more than you think, Samuel. You always have been. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, and Samuel found himself at peace for the first time in a long while. He had faced his fears, had stepped into a world he never thought he would be a part of, and had come out the other side stronger for it. And as he sat by the fire, surrounded by the Apache people, he knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would continue to fight for their land, their future, and each other. In the weeks that followed the battle, the camp began to find its rhythm again. The victory had been hard-won, but it had also brought them closer together. The Apache tribe, with their fierce warriors and wise leaders, continued to rebuild, stronger than ever. Samuel stood alongside Ayana, watching as the camp flourished. His life had changed in ways he never imagined, but now, with every passing day, he felt more at peace. He had found a place among them, not just as a man from the outside, but as a partner, a protector, and a part of the future they were building. Ayana was as determined as ever, her resolve unwavering, but there was a softness in her eyes when she looked at Samuel, a recognition of the bond they had formed. They had faced challenges together, and though the battle for their land was not over, they had made it through the first of many trials. Samuel's thoughts often drifted back to the day she had first asked him to join her, to help create a future together. It seemed like a lifetime ago, and yet, here they were, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. As the days turned into months, Samuel continued to learn, not just from Ayana, but from the land itself. The skills he had once considered simple and mundane, the knowledge of planting, of building, of living off the earth, had become a lifeline. He was no longer just surviving. He was thriving. His bond with the Apache people deepened, and with it, his understanding of what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. He had always thought of strength in terms of physical power, of the ability to defend oneself, to survive. But now, he understood that true strength came from unity, from the connection between people, from the willingness to fight not just for oneself, but for the future of those around them. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Ayana stood beside him, looking out over the valley. The firelight flickered in her eyes, and for the first time, Samuel saw the quiet hope that had always been there beneath her fierce exterior. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ayana turned to him, her expression softening. "Now, we continue," she said. "We build, we fight, and we live. The land is ours, but it is also a gift, and we will protect it, protect each other, for as long as we can." Samuel nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had come here unsure of himself, uncertain of his place in the world. But now, standing beside Ayana, he knew he had found his purpose. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, but no matter what, they would do it as a family. As the seasons changed and the tribe continued to grow, so too did Samuel's understanding of what it meant to be part of this world. There would always be dangers, threats from those who sought to take what was theirs. But Samuel had learned that no matter how fierce the storm, no matter how great the challenge, the strength of the Apache people, and the strength of his bond with Ayana, would see them through. One evening, as the first stars began to appear in the sky, Samuel sat by the fire, Ayana beside him. She looked at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You have become one of us, Samuel," she said softly. "You are no longer just a man who lives in the land. You are a part of the land, a part of us." Samuel smiled back, his heart full. "I think I always was," he said quietly. "I just needed to see it." Together, they sat in the silence of the night, the crackling fire the only sound between them. And for the first time in his life, Samuel felt completely at home, knowing that whatever the future held, he would face it with Ayana and the Apache people by his side.